Good morning, everyone. Oh, a little bit louder. Can I have it a little bit? Yeah. Oh, bass. I need the bass. Good morning, everybody. How are we today? It's like you've never seen me here on the stage just recently dressed in purple. How is everyone? Having fun? Yeah? Good? Lovely. This is not one of these talks where everyone's going to sit silently. This is Torsten. He's going to be giving an amazing talk on Microsoft Teams SIP Gateway. Now, to all of you, you know what that is. I'm a recruitment consultant. To me, I haven't got the first clue. But he's going to need an enormous round of applause and also a bit of feedback every now and then, a cheer. You know, no heckling. That's my job. So can I please get a massive round of applause for Torsten, who's going to be coming up and talking to you for the very first. Are you actually leaving? Oh my God. That's awkward, isn't it? Wrong decision. Oh my God, anyway. Can I please... No, he's leaving. Right, can I please get a massive round of applause for Torsten talking about Microsoft Teams SIP Gateway? Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, and welcome to my session about Microsoft Teams SIP Gateway. And first, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Torsten Pickern. I'm 24 years old. No, sorry, 42 years old. I'm coming from Germany. I'm working as a cloud architect at Lucania GmbH. It's a company in Germany, a Microsoft partner. And yeah, you can find me on different social media platforms like Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube. You can follow me there. And then I would start the session, I would say. So what can you expect from my session the next 45 minutes? First of all, I will talk about the fundamentals and the basics. For the basics. So what you need to know about the Microsoft Teams SIP Gateway and the technology. What are the requirements to install it, to use it? What are the features? How we can install it or enable it. And at the end, I will give you some advices from my knowledge. So the Microsoft Teams SIP Gateway. It's quite new, I would say. It's a technology by Microsoft from the Microsoft Teams platform, and you can connect native ZIP endpoints. It was introduced in the TAP program in November last year. I had the luck to test it during the TAP and to make the first experience, but at the end it becomes GA in January this year. And the service itself, or with the service itself, you can connect native ZIP endpoints to the Microsoft Teams platform. And therefore, we have a support for certified SIB Online products. So in the past, we call it 3PIP, and specific Cisco IP phones. So that's very important. Not every basic ZIP device you can connect to the Microsoft Teams platform. Currently, you only can connect when the phone is certified for Skype for Business Online, so it's a 3PIP device, or if it is a specific Cisco IP device. What are the requirements to use it? Of course, the IP DeskPhone must be certified by Microsoft, as always. So when we are talking about SPCs, about Microsoft Teams rooms, headsets, we need a certification by Microsoft, and that is the case also for the Microsoft Teams SIP Gateway. Then, the phone itself needs to be run in the native ZIP mode. So when we are talking about a Poly VVX, for example, when we are talking about a Poly VVX phone, we have two modes on it. We can run it in the Skype for Business Online mode or in the native ZIP mode. And when we would like to use it, we have to switch. We must switch the phone from the Skype for Business Online mode into the generic ZIP mode. What is also important, it's depending on the phone itself. So some phones, like the Poly VVX, the firmware can switch by a configuration parameter. But some phones, for example, Yealink, there you need to install a special license and also a special generic firmware. So you can switch the phone itself into the ZIP mode. Then the phone itself will be provisioned by Microsoft. So there's a provisioning URL, and the phone itself will be deployed by Microsoft. And of course, we need a user with a Microsoft Teams phone system license, and the user is must be enabled for the Teams phone system. So it's not enough to have assigned the license to the user. You also need to assign a phone number, enable the enterprise voice feature, and assign a voice routing policy. That's also important. When you have some common area phones, of course, we can use this license as a special license. It's a little bit cheaper than the normal Microsoft Teams phone system license in combination with Microsoft 365 license, for example. So the common area phone license itself includes Microsoft Teams, since this month also Exchange Online, Intune, and yeah, it's cheaper than the normal license, and you can use this license to enable the user to sign in into the phone itself. Here I have a list of the different phones supported currently by Microsoft. You can find a QR code, but also a link to the docs article by Microsoft. As you can see here, Yealink on the right side, has the most devices, so it's not so easy to read, but yeah, just pick up the docs page there you can find all information. We have Poly, we have audio codes. They are certified to use Microsoft Teams ZIP Gateway and to connect to it. A special one is Cisco, as you can see. So Cisco is not a 3-pip phone, it's a classic PBX phone, but there's also a certification for it. You can connect Cisco IP devices to Microsoft Teams, but here it's important, it's a special series, and you need the MPP firmware. I'm not a Cisco guy, I'm honest, but I know that MPP stands for multi-platform. It's a special firmware version and a special license. Please ask your Cisco vendor if you have such devices. I know, or I heard that this is a special license you have to request at Cisco, and you have to pay for it also. So ask your Cisco partner if your phones are supported by Microsoft Teams ZIP Gateway. What are the features when we are talking about Microsoft Teams ZIP Gateway? First of all, the basic features are given, so we can start and receive calls, of course. We can hold the call, resume the call, merge or forward calls. So not so fancy stuff, but what's new, we can set the do not disturb mode on the phone, so we can change the presence for the user, log in at the phone. We can mute ourselves at the phone. We can access the voicemail system. This is also new. So we can directly access the voicemail system, configure it, and also we get also a notification when we have missed calls, for example. And we have support for DTMF. So if you would like to call a conferencing service like Microsoft and you need to put in the conference ID, it is supported by DTMF. That's why we have the next point, join Microsoft Teams meetings. It's also supported. And special one, enable direct call forwarding on the phone. So I don't know if you already connected 3-pip phones to Microsoft Teams. You have here the Skype for Business Online bridge between the phone and device and Microsoft Teams platform. So there's a component from Skype for Business Online connected. And when you log in into the phone, the login goes to the Skype for Business Online piece and the cloud, and from there to Microsoft Teams. And in consequence, some features are missing. For example, the call forwarding option. This leads to the misunderstanding on the phone itself, because the user is able to set a call forwarding on the phone itself. When we are talking about the Poly VVX, for example, you can enable a call forwarding, but the phone will not start to ring when a call comes in. No, sorry, that's the case. So the phone starts to ring when the call comes in, and that's because the Skype for Business Online component is between the phone itself and Microsoft Teams. Call forwarding settings are not forwarded to the Microsoft Teams platform, and therefore they are not used. And this is a big advantage of the Microsoft Teams ZIP Gateway. When you connect a 3-pip phone to the ZIP Gateway, you are able to use the call forwarding settings, and this is a big advantage, of course, for the user itself, because they can then use this feature. What are the usage scenarios for the Microsoft? Yeah? This feature is also working. Yeah. So we have the question here if the dial-in feature is working for Teams conferencings or meetings. Yeah. As far as I know, the phone, you have to dial the conference number and put in the conference ID. So it's a classic telephone join. Yeah. So what are the usage scenarios for the Teams SIP gateway? We can use the phones in public area, of course, like in the library or on the floor. We can use it as a shared device in the production area. This is my experience in most of my projects, that we are using the technology in case of shared devices in the production area where we do not have a named account on it. Then some customers are asking for emergency phones, so phones just mounted on the wall for the case that there's an emergency and all computers are already logged off. Then the normal user is not able to initiate an emergency call, of course, because Teams is already closed, and therefore they need an option, for example, a phone on the wall in the floor to call the emergency service. This is also a case we can use it. Then, in comparison to the 3 PIP phones, the Teams SIP gateway is optimized in its functionality regarding Microsoft Teams. And when you are in transition from a classic PBX to Microsoft Teams, or from Link or Skype for Business to Microsoft Teams, you can save some costs because the Skype for Business Online certified devices can be used still with Microsoft Teams, because we have the Microsoft Teams SIP gateway in place. What is here missing on the slides, when we are talking about to buy new phones, for example, because there is no, the current hardware is not supported with the Teams SIP gateway, for example, or there is no Skype for Business implementation in place. So the customer has to buy new IP desk phones because the customer would like to have some. Then I would recommend to buy the Teams native SIP phones, like we have from Yearling, from Poly, and from Audio Codes also. So please do not buy older ones, 3 PIP phones, and use the Microsoft Teams SIP gateway. Please then buy native Teams devices, because the experience is even much better on the phone itself. You have more functions on the native Teams SIP device in comparison to a 3 PIP device. For example, you have access to your calendar, you have access to all the Microsoft Teams settings, can set the call forwarding there, and the look and feel is most the same like on the Microsoft Teams soft client. Therefore, I would recommend to buy Microsoft Teams native phones if you have to buy some. Yeah, let's talk about the installation and activation of the Microsoft Teams SIP gateway service itself. It's quite easy, it's not rocket science. There's a global calling policy where you can enable this SIP option, or if you would like to test it for a smaller amount of users, you can also use a user-based calling policy, so create a new one, activate the service itself, and then assign this calling policy to your users before you roll it out and deploy it globally. Then, very important, I made also the failure that I enabled the service and would like to directly log in the phone, but it will not work. Microsoft itself on the docs articles say that it can take up to 24 hours till the service is active. It's a little bit misleading, because when you try to log in the phone earlier, as I said, I enable the service and try to log in the phone, there's no error message. It's only that the phone will do nothing and you're waiting for something what will not happen. So just wait this 24 hours and then it should work. As I said before, some devices require to enable the native SIP firmware before the deployment. So if you have a Yearling phone, for example, here you need to request a special license from Yearling itself. Just open a ticket on the ticket website from Yearling, and there you can request the native ZIP license for the phone. And also you need to install the native ZIP firmware on the device. When we are talking about Poly This is only a configuration parameter because the installed firmware has both versions implemented, and you only have to switch between the generic SIB mode and the Skype for Business Online mode. Then we have some official provisioning URLs from Microsoft we can use for the provisioning. We have a provisioning URL for the EMEA region, but also for APAC and the US. And what is also important, if you would like to show up the phone with a special UI in your local language, for example, for Germany, there are, I guess, in some 8 versions. So there's a suffix you can add to the URL, and then the phone comes up with this language UI. For German, it is language_de, and then the phone comes up with the German language UI. When you provision the phone itself, there are some reboots. I counted 3 or 2 reboots till the phone is provisioned and prepared to log in the first user. And the login itself, you can use the device login web page, /device login. I guess it's already known. When you have conditional access and multi-factor authentication, you can also use it here in that case with the device login page. So try it out, it's very easy. Then we are already on the first demo part. I will show you how to enable the service in the Teams Admin Center when the internet connection is hopefully there. So let's check, yeah, it looks good. It's quite easy, as I said, it's not rocket science. Just go into your Microsoft Teams Admin Center, open the voice part, and here you can find the calling policies. And when I click on it, you will see that you have the global one. This is the org-wide default. And when I open the global policy, here you have the last option. ZIP devices can be used for calls. This is new since January this year. And by default, this policy is disabled, and you have to enable it, and then please wait the 24 hours. When you would like to test it for special users, just create a new policy, name it, enable zip comsverse, and also here the same story. It copied only the global policy, therefore the option is already enabled. If the zip parameter is disabled in your global policy, you have to switch it here or to enable it here and then save it. Of course, when we create a new policy, it also takes some hours till the policy is active, and you need to assign this policy to your test users to test the whole stuff regarding Microsoft Teams zip gateway. But yeah, that's the whole magic, how to enable this, the zip interface for Microsoft Teams. Then I prepared a second demo, how to log in a phone itself or how to prepare a phone for Microsoft Teams zip gateway. But as you can see, we only have wireless and not a LAN connection, not PoE. Therefore, I did a recording at home of the scenario. I used a Poly VVX phone for this. It's running currently with the default settings, so it has the Skype for Business Online mode enabled. You will see it here. Just go to the simple setup, and here the base profile is currently configured for Skype for Business. So it's running in the 3-pip mode, and we can switch it here in the generic zip mode. But because Poly is one of these vendors, here you can see to select which mode we would like to run, because Poly provides a firmware with both modules implemented. You only need to configure the provisioning URL from Microsoft, and the configuration file from Microsoft already includes the parameter to switch the phone to the generic zip mode. So you just plug in here or put in here the URL. We are using here the Europe one. I don't add a suffix for the language because we are here on an international event. So I switched the server type to HTTP, put in the URL provisioning URL from Microsoft, and that's it. You have the option to put in the language selection, but in that case I didn't made it. Then another important topic, if your phones are implemented and provisioned by internal servers from Yeeling, from Poly, however, mostly you have already configured a DHCP option 160, 161 with the URL of your internal provisioning server. If you would like to try it out, please disable the phone to access or to get the configuration from the provisioning service. Why? Because when you configure here the Microsoft Teams provisioning service and you reboot the phone, when the phone will restart, it will look into the DHCP settings, will find your internal DHCP configured service for the provisioning, and then revert the configuration and throw out the Microsoft Teams provisioning services. So disable this option, put the phone in a special DHCP scope, whatever you would like to do, but disable the option that the phone will get the configuration from your internal service. So normally the phone makes a reboot. In that case, it doesn't make it. That's why I restarted the phone manually. You will see it in a few seconds. And then the phone itself reboots. It will get the provisioning stuff from Microsoft. And yeah, we have to wait a little bit. There's some delay. I waited for the reboot, but it does not showing up here. Therefore, I restarted the phone manually and then switched back to the phone, paused the recording, and then you will see that the phone initiate a restart, and then the phone itself comes up with the Microsoft Teams logo. You already see it here, reboot initiated. In my case, it did 2 times, so it rebooted twice, and after it, you can see here the Microsoft provisioning is done. We have the Microsoft Teams logo. We have the sign-in option. As always, you can check if there is already a network connection. So if the timestamp is correctly, then you know that there's a network connection and that the phone is good. So here we can see the provisioning of the user or the option to log in. Let me go back a little bit. So I use sign in, and then the pair code will be generated with the URL. When you have a user session in the web browser, just plug in aka-ms device login, use the code from the phone. And then if there is already a user logged in this case, my lab user Clara Sprudel is already registered in the web session. I select this user to log into the phone. And as you can see, I have the Teams ZIP gateway as an application, and the login occurs from Ireland. So this is also important. If you have any conditional access rules implemented, there is, from Microsoft in the docs article, you can find some IP addresses to exclude from the conditional access, so the login will happen. And that's it. So this is all what happens. You get a short information that the logon is okay, and then normally the phone should reboot and comes up with a Microsoft Teams user on the phone itself. So when we have the phone logged into the device, what are the advantages for me as an administrator? This is at the end also important. It's not only an advantage for the user because we have the call forwarding option, for example, or direct access to the voicemail system. What is for me as an administrator important in comparison to the 3-pip mode? The first and only thing, and most important thing, I guess, is that the phones are listed in the Teams Admin Center. When you are using the 3-pip mode in Skype for Business Online to register in Teams, you will not see the phone itself. Perhaps you have an entry, a device registration in the Azure Active Directory, but that's all. You do not have a current status. You do not see if there's a user logged in. You do not see if the phone is online or not. What is the status of the phone? Is the current firmware installed? So it's complete blind. And yeah, when we're using the Microsoft Teams ZIP gateway, we have a special device category, ZIP devices. Perhaps you already see it. And there the phone is showing up. and we get a status of the phone. We can restart the phone, and we can roll out also updates. Then I didn't try it out, but Microsoft described this process. You can also do a mass deployment of CUP devices. So if you have, I don't know, 50 devices, 100 of devices to roll out with Microsoft Teams SIP Gateway, there's a mass deployment routine in the Teams Admin Center to do so. And let's check what are the features here. So back into the Teams Admin Center. As I said, you have here the Teams device section, and you can find zip devices. And here all your devices registered to the Microsoft Teams SIP Gateway are listed. And as you can see, currently I have 2 devices with Clara Sprudel. I can see the device name. Depending on the vendor itself, I can see which version it is. I have a status, so I can see that it's healthy, or here at the end I see that there are some phones offline and signed out. I can see the manufacturer, the model of the device. I can assign tags to do some policy assignments, and I have also the history. History I come back later. So when we click on one of these devices, you will see that I have an option to restart the device. I can refresh the details, and currently it doesn't matter. Here are some other informations, like the MAC address and history. So if you initiate a restart, for example, you have 2 options. You can restart the phone immediately, or you can schedule a restart. But even when you start do a restart immediately, you will see, depending on the usage of the phone, the restart command is just queued for the phone itself. So it takes some time till the phone itself is restarted. And this we can see here in the activity or history log. So if there's still a job in queue, we can see it here. Or if the job is done, we also get a notification here and see what happens on the device. Also, it's very useful if we have several administrators in the company for Teams. I can see that what happens on the phone itself. So this is a administrative part in the Teams Admin Center. From my point of view, a big advantage for us as an administrator that I can see the devices and do some basic management on it. And again, a short video. How does it look for the user itself? As you can see here, the user is logged in. I have here my phone number. So this is a signed line URI for the user. The user is logged in. I have the present status here. And I can switch to Do Not Disturb directly on the phone. And I can revert the present status, remove the Do Not Disturb, and go online. I can access the voicemail system. When I click on it, it will open. As you can see here, I can see how many messages are stored. If there are any urgent ones or news, old one, I can directly connect to the Microsoft voicemail system, listen to the messages, delete them, configure the welcome message, all the stuff we know already from the voicemail system, of course. Then we have access to the history, so we can see which numbers are dialed from the phone, if it's an inbound call or an outbound call. We can sign in, of course. And for me, the important thing ever, we can configure call forwarding. Microsoft makes it very easy here. So we have some DTMF codes we need to plug in. For example, *33* is for a persistent call forwarding. 34 is for a timeout forwarding. And 35 is for a ring also, so a simultaneous ring. And here's important, when you dial the number or put in the *33*, you need to put in the number to the redirect number at the end. This is important, so the user has to dial the whole number, *33*, and then the forwarding number or the destination number hook up the handset, and then the configuration is done. Sorry. To reset, press *32*, and then the whole call forwarding settings are reset to default. Yeah, that's it. So at the end, a normal call or a normal phone configuration. It is provisioned by Microsoft. So currently there's no chance to use E-Link or Poly or whatever management system to do the configuration. So here, if you want, you can configure the different dial pads on the phone with this call forwarding options to make it easier for your users to configure a call forwarding, of course. So what is my experience with the Microsoft Teams ZIP Gateway? First of all, as I already said, please wait the 24 hours after the activation. It really needs this 24 hours. Without that, it will not work. Then we have no B2E support currently. So when we are talking about 3-pip and the Skype for Business times, we could install a special client on the Microsoft Windows desktop system and could do a remote dial, for example, or use the phone itself as an audio device with this B2E, or we could connect the phone over a VDI session, which is required when we are talking about Windows 365, for example. Currently, unfortunately, there's no B2UE support, so there's no client from the vendors or no support for it. Then we do not have an IPv6 support, and recurring policy sync after successful login. So if you change anything to the calling policy, for example, and the device is already logged in, you do not need to restart the phone, so the changes are deployed to the phone. The phone will request changes or ask for changes the whole time. If there are any changes, just let the phone edit this, and after a few hours it should sync the policies and will accept the changes. Then support for call queue is also important. So if you have phones as member in a call queue, it will work. Important here, I didn't find any official documentation from Microsoft that call queue is supported with the Teams ZIP Gateway. And I talked to an engineer a few months or years ago, and he said, when it's not documented, we will not support it. So officially it's not supported, I guess, I'm not sure. But I tried in my lab and it works. So if you have a member logged in over the Teams ZIP Gateway, the phone will ring and you can answer the call. Of course, we do not have the extended view about the call history and all this stuff because it's a single device here. Then we have support for a dial plan or short dial. So if you configure the dial plan to normalize the 3 digits to the E164 number format, we have support for this also. Just assign the dial plan to the user and then it should work. Difference between the phone and the Microsoft Teams desktop client. On the Microsoft Teams desktop client, you directly see the normalization. So if you put in 3 digits, it will normalize it to the full number. On the phone, you will not see this normalization. So it stays on the 3 digits, it's doing the dial out, and the platform is normalizing the call and will start the call. And important, pay attention to conditional access. If you configure something, trusted WAN IP addresses and all the stuff, important that the logon itself will be done from Ireland or Amsterdam, depending on your region, and therefore you need to give access on the conditional access website or exclude this special IP addresses directly. Next question, what will happen to the Microsoft Teams ZIP Gateway? Are there any supports for further ZIP devices? Any other IP vendors? So I don't know, but I hope that there will come some more IP vendors, of course. DECT is also a big topic. So most of our customers are waiting for support by DECT or for DECT. And here I can say that Microsoft already announced that in July there is a support for DECT. You can already download and install a firmware version from SpectraLink to use the Microsoft Teams SIP gateway in combination with SpectraLink. And the next big one is media packs from audio codes, for example. So if we have a lot of analog devices, it would be more easier to configure them over the Microsoft Teams Admin Center or control them over the Microsoft Teams Admin Center. But there we have to wait. So currently it's not clear if there will come a support for other IP vendors and media packs. Then, of course, I would like to have a provisioning by the vendor software itself. Currently, this is missing, but I hope that in the near future there is some roadmap topics on that. And replacement of the Skype for Business Online proxy. And my personal opinion is yes, this is the first step from Microsoft to replace the Skype for Business Online proxy. We still have to connect the 3 PIP phones. And so my advice to you is, please use or do your first steps with Microsoft Teams Gateway, collect some experience, because I think that the Skype for Business Online proxy will run out of time. Even there's currently no official termination or no termination date announced. Yeah, that's it. Any questions? Yes, please. Yeah.
You have to go visit every single phone and change the URL manually?
It depends on. So the question is how to do the provisioning with the phones. Are there any options? Microsoft officially recommends to use also the DHCP options. So if you have a DHCP in place, just replace the current URL from your internal system or from the cloud-based system, from Yealink, Poly, whatever you use, and replace it by the Microsoft provisioning URL. That's all you need to do if you have a mass deployment. My advice to you is just try a few of them. So take 5 devices, 10 devices, put manually the provisioning URL in the device, check if it all is working, and then change the provisioning URL on the DHCP server and make it mass deployment. And then it depends on your environment. Some users or some customers have, of course, different locations, different DHCP scopes. My advice in this case is not to make a mass deployment to all DHCP scopes. Perhaps we start with one DHCP scope, get some experience on it, and then we move forward and we'll do the change for each DHCP scope, since we know that it will work